Have you heard of Dread Templar? That's right, this game was on Steam the other day on sale, and I just knew I had to pick it up because it looks so...
Who do you think's gonna watch a video on Dread Templar?
Can't you see I'm recording a video here?
Yeah, you told me to come by so we could record.
Listen, Cortana, I literally have said, you will show up when I do a Halo video.
Oh, I see how it is. I'm only allowed to grace your presence.
Why do you have to ruin my life? Why? I gave you a phone call one time, and then you just show up out of the blue, knock on my door, and say...
Oh, Mr. Big Deal now, Mr. Big Deal. Well, you weren't a big deal when you told me to come over. Oh, you're so special. Look how cool you are.
Listen, this is a really cool game. Can I just get into it? Please. Please.
What makes you think people care about this game anyway?
Well, you know, G-Man and Civvy haven't covered it, so maybe I'll get some views.
Well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe the game's not even that good and not even worth their time.
Can you just bug off, please? Please, for the love of God, dude, I can't stand this shit anymore.
Fine, whatever. You probably don't even want me for the Halo video anymore. I'm not even worth your time.
No, I want you for the Halo video.
That's great news. I'll get my stuff and put it in the guest bedroom.
That doesn't mean you can just stay and like, use my house. You can't use my guest bedroom.
So what? I'm supposed to sit outside and live in the shed like some sort of dog?
Fine, whatever. Do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm going to do my Dread Templar video now. Thank you. Let's get into the gameplay. So yeah, that's right, we're going to be talking about Dread Templar today without all the rude interruptions. I promise I locked her in the spare bedroom and she is not going to be bothering us for the rest of the video. Oh God, I love the sound of silence. I can finally hear myself think, and I don't get a lot of that. I got a kid and a wife, and now I have a Cortana. I don't know what to do with myself. But when I was talking to Cortana and said that G-Man and Civvy hadn't covered this, I was correct. They hadn't covered it yet. Why, I don't know. This game is actually really, really fun. But I thought, since there was a lack of coverage, and since I am the giggity schmoodle of gaming YouTube, I might as well give it a crack, since I hadn't heard anything about it. I was going in blind, and that was kind of refreshing to me, considering it seems like we live in a very, very deep, giant pit of content creation, where at any moment I can look up and see if a game's good or bad, or see what somebody thinks of it. But this one, I was going in with my own 2 eyeballs, my own 2 ears, my own penis, sitting right on the desk, completely naked and free to the air conditioning. Let's do a little background. Let's get a little bit of juice behind this video. This game was created by T19 Games. Yeah, that's right. I had never heard of them either. They'd only make a couple of other games, one being a VR and one being a side-scroller, so I'm not going to be playing those games. But from what I read on their website, is their main objective is they want to bring retro-style games back with a modern twist, modern feel. That's kind of what a lot of people are doing right now. So these guys, though, I have to give them a little bit more credit, because going into this game feels a lot more modernized than a lot of your games out there. So when you see Dread Templar on your Steam page and you're thinking, ooh, another boomer shooter, I don't really know what the definition of boomer shooter is. I don't want to get into that because I know I'm going to have a bunch of spurgs in my comments being like, you don't know what boomer shooter is? It's this, this, this. And then somebody else is going to be like, well, actually, let me push my glasses up and then fondle my ball sack and then flip my own clit, and I will tell you exactly what a boomer shooter is. I don't care about that discourse. I like shooting things and I like having fun. But this is less Project Warlock, more Proteus. Proteus is a good example of what this is kind of similar to. You know what? Scrap that. Scrap even that. I think the best example of what this game is looking at Shadow Warrior 2013. Now, if you know anything about me, or watch my streams or whatever, you will see me talk about Shadow Warrior 2013 over and over again. I love that game. I think it's a phenomenal entry into the Shadow Warrior franchise, especially as a reboot, and looking at the fact that I don't know what was going on when they were doing sequels to Build Engine games, but it seemed like they couldn't get their heads out of their ass to make anything decent, except for when they rebooted Shadow Warrior. That game is a masterpiece. And I feel like every time I jumped into this game and started playing a little bit of it, I had this deep down feeling that I was playing a game that was similar to Shadow Warrior 2013, which the sequels to that game couldn't even feel like that, because the Shadow Warrior games go, Shadow Warrior 2013 feels like this game that we're watching right now, but then you go to Shadow Warrior 2 and it's like this weird Borderlands, nobody knows what Shadow Warrior 2 is doing. Shadow Warrior 3 is like Doom Eternal, all over the place. I don't know what's going on with that series, but this game sitting right here feels like that, and I couldn't be happier, because when I played that game I had an absolute wonderful time, and this sits in that nice little zone that I have at least one game to compare to that one. But before we get too far into gameplay, I want to give this game a little credit too, because we look at a lot of these retro titles and they don't do anything with story. At least this game's trying a little. Don't get me wrong, it's nothing special. It's still just like a blank image with a little bit of shaky cam to make it look like it's moving, but it's still a basic picture. I do think it's very artistically well done. The voice acting on it though is terrible. It's not very good. I don't know what they were trying to go for here, because it gives you like a creepy pasta vibe. It's weird. It's weird. It has like this weird shaky like auto tune over it. It's just so weird, and it's so off-putting. I feel like if they were to redo this game, or at least make a sequel, I think they should hire somebody with a much better voice to maybe try to do something a little different with it, because it just doesn't work for me. The story in and of itself is fairly interesting for what small tidbit it is. Now the whole story is broke down like this. When you're a wee little lad, you are sitting in a closet because some demon's knocking on your door. Your grandfather, being a badass, pulls out his boomstick and starts sending their brains into the atmosphere. Only they don't quite get all killed by old Papa, and he dies, and you are left just by yourself. Some dude shows up, presents you with the power of the Dread Templar, and then you go along your merry way, getting revenge for your grandfather, trying to end this demon scourge once and for all. You being the Dread Templar kind of pours over into almost every aspect of this gameplay. Well, at least when it comes into atmosphere. Atmospherically, and when you pick up any gun, how they look, it feels like you are in a dark fantasy style game. The enemies feel like there's something out of Berserk. Everything looks so goddamn cool. And on top of that, this game doesn't sacrifice to try to hit that zone. Now, you will see a ton of these retro shooters and older games take this style and then they just make everything dark, or in terms of Doom, red, or Quake, brown. You see a lot of overlap where it's just you go to an area, it feels the same as every other area, it just looks slightly cooler. Not with Dread Templar. Dread Templar will take you to multiple different biomes of very diverse backgrounds and styles, but you will also still feel like you're in the same universe because that dark fantasy vibe will push through it. It is probably the best overlap I have seen done in this. Now, is it the perfect execution? I mean, the story's kind of and the voice acting ruins any sort of story beats you could have in this game. But everything else pushing you atmospherically pushes that story really down to the dirt, and you feel like you could be really getting in it, digging down deep. It's just, I hate that the whole audio problems, where it feels so off-putting and feels so wrong compared to what it should be. I really hope they get a new voice actor. And one other thing, while I'm here on terms of story, I think this game plays like it should have been like, back in the day, if this game was made on something, it would have been a build engine game, especially with it trying to do the little story beats. One problem with that, though, is the whole build engine people. Those guys were really into giving the main character voice lines throughout the thing. Now, were they important? Were they out here saying, well, you see this thing on the left, that is your mom's taint, and your mom's taint is important because, no, it's usually like, go back to hell, demon, I'm going to put you in the ground, stuff like that. It was all cool, and it was one-liners, and I think this game was really missing out on that, because I've already said that it has that overlay of Shadow Warrior 2013, and in that game, one of the great things about that experience is you never got bored because there was always a great one-liner from Lo Wang, and on top of that, you had your companion talking to you too, and it never felt too annoying. I mean, a lot of games, you have to write a fine line when you do voice work on a character during gameplay, or you end up with, like, God of War, where he's constantly talking to Mimir, and you just want that head to go floating to the bottom of the ocean. But I do think this game needed something like that. I felt like when I got to the little cutscenes, I'd almost forgot that there were cutscenes in this game, and I'm like, oh yeah, story beats. The atmosphere was pushing me toward that, but I forgot there was an actual story, and once I started hearing the guy kind of drone on, like I was listening to a crappy creepypasta, I started tuning it out again. I would just wait till he was done talking and reread what was on screen. I feel like there is so much potential here to at least make a sequel to this, maybe really expand on these ideas and add some cool voice lines, get a cool voice actor, and expand what your core game could do, or maybe just spin off, make another game, same type of vibe, but do something new, because this game does kind of cap itself off with the story at the end, but that hasn't stopped games from pouring out 57 sequels anyways. Now let's talk weaponry. Now that I've gotten story out of the way and atmosphere kind of out of the way, I'll probably touch on it more because I like to drone on like an old man sitting on a porch talking to a tree. That's who I am. I'm an 87-year-old man who's gonna be 95 tomorrow. You have no power. You don't have my ID. You don't know who I am. But what this game does for weapons, back on actual topic, what this game does for weapons is very similar to, like, Forgive Me Father. Now, I don't have a video out yet on Forgive Me Father, but I will eventually. I'll get there. I know you're in the comments like, I don't know anything about Forgive Me Father. I'll get there. You just wait, you pretty boy. Or girl, you could be a lady. I don't know what kind of genitalia you have in your pants. I want you to listen to my videos regardless. But what this game does is you start with, like, basic pistols that are, like, dual-wielding Glocks. You got a basic shotgun, a basic double barrel shotgun. But when you upgrade, when you get to the final tier in the upgrade, your gun starts to change. Now, Forgive Me Father, it's a little more deep, and every single upgrade bump your weapon does significantly look different in terms of gameplay. In this game, your gun only looks different once you actually hit that last tier. But when you get to that last tier and you found the crystals in order to do that, because in this game you have to find crystals in order to be able to progress through it, which makes the upgrades feel really meaningful, because you're going and finding side areas, and some of the side areas are platforming puzzles or insane gauntlets of just hell platforming. There's some actual hell platforms in this game, or it's just so much cool side content, and you want to go play that side content because that means that you're going to unlock some really cool, interesting guns. And on top of that, there's just such a wide array of weapons in this game. You don't just have your pistols, your shotgun, your machine gun, and then your rocket launcher. No, this game's got a rocket launcher. The rocket launcher is actually like a Demon Knight weapon. So you have this cool Demon Knight weapon, and then you have the Demon Knight pistol. Then you go down and you start getting into your human guns, which are just insane, because you do have the basic human guns. You got your pistol. Your pistol will then secondary as machine guns, your dual-wielding Uzis, which I don't know if you know anything about me, but a game honestly will get bonus points the moment it puts dual-wielding in. I grew up, the first game I ever played was Halo 2 that I fell in love with. And ever since that game, I have loved dual-wielding in every single game I've ever played with it. And I found both dual-wielding pistols and dual-wielding machine guns both useful in very different scenarios. Take, for example, if you're sitting there and you got an enemy a long ways away. You're not going to just spray bullets at them. You're going to pull out the double pistols and try to get those shots to really hit scan on that mother trucker. But if you have a bunch of people flooding in on you, you're going to switch to the machine gun and really try to pour as many bullets into those assholes as you can to really clear the room. It's wonderful how you have these options, and it feels like they were all made perfectly. And as you upgrade them, they truly become meaner and tougher weaponry throughout this game. And you will truly need to utilize them, because you will have times where the pump shotgun is going to be better for some of your platforming little puzzles and stuff when you're getting ran through. And then you need the double barrel just to clear space so you can survive. So you're going to constantly be switching through there. On top of that, you have a bow that constantly recharges ammo. So if you're in a situation where you're getting kind of tight on ammo, which doesn't happen very often, thank God, because if this game was one of those nightmare never give me ammo games, I would have dropped it. No, I wouldn't have dropped it. I would have pushed through. I would have been a good content monkey for you. I would have clapped my cymbals together, just like the clap I got in Costa Rica in 1947. But it is refreshing to have a long distance weapon that recharges. And it's not only the bow that is your long distance rechargeable weapon. There's also a katana. You start with dual wielding katanas, which is based and cool and Sigma. I mean, I already said that there's that overlay with Shadow Warrior 2013, and I told you I was going to keep bringing that up. But the fact you start with katanas and the katana actual weapon use in this game is great, because there's this weird thing with FPS games where when they try to do the sword play or melee combat, it ends up being just just the worst thing in the world. It's like trying to scratch your taint with a katana. It's awful, but in this game it feels very quick, very fresh. And if you're in a position where nothing's close to you and it's far away, you can slap the two katanas together like your goddamn Darth Maul and then use it as a fucking javelin to really ensure that your point stands and their brains end up on the ground. And with the bow, you have either a quick fire option where you're goddamn Robin Hood just firing arrows at 1,000 seconds a minute, or you can charge it up and really get that high power hit, which you will need to learn. And when it comes to all the different weapons in this game, you are going to need to learn every side style of weapon, what the secondary does, what the good weapon switches are, what's better in what opportunities. It is very, very much like Doom Eternal or a lot of those Twitch shooters in that regard. It doesn't ever go too far. It still stays more grounded, more like a Serious Sam or a Shadow Warrior 2013. It never goes full Doom Eternal, more Doom 2016, but it does teach you how to utilize your weapons in the best capacity possible, especially when it comes down to the boss fights. Now, the boss fights in this game are absolutely insane. The guy you're watching me fight on screen killed me so many goddamn times because you have to fight a gauntlet of enemies. And you have seen it throughout the gameplay playing in the background where I was like hiding on a staircase and too much of a bitch to even poke my head out to danger because there's millions of enemies. It put me through a goddamn gauntlet of hell just to get to this boss. And when I got to the boss, he wasn't a pushover. The bosses almost feel Souls-like in that regard. They really make you stay on your toes, make you watch your surroundings, and really understand the environment and all the environmental AoE attacks that these bosses can bring in. You have to learn them and like notate them in the back of your head and learn how to best maneuver around them and what weapons will be best in that regard. It is some of the best FPS boss fight things without any bullshit gimmicks. It is just you versus boss, and you have to figure out what is best for you to beat them. And it is the first time, not the first time, there's probably other examples of great boss fights in FPS games, but this is one game where almost every single boss fight was a spectacle and was absolutely amazing to come across. There is some absolutely gnarly bosses in this game. I can't even go through all of them. I don't want to go through all of them because I don't want to spoil every little nook and cranny throughout this. You will see a few throughout this video, and this, I mean, if you watch my videos, you know I do spoilers. I don't feel like I even have to say spoilers because that's who I am. If you're coming to my videos, don't be brain dead. You know I'm just gonna lay everything out on the table. But there are so many bosses in this that it would be impossible for me to recollect from every single moment because they're all good in their own regard. There's nothing that just felt like a complete pushover or shitty. It felt like every single boss was made to near perfection for what you're going to do, and it never felt like I was just constantly endlessly shooting ammo at them. It felt like when I shot them there was a decent damage to shot ratio happening on the boss. It just felt like they had enough attacks to counteract the amount of damage I was doing. So it was about movement, it was about fluidity, and this game does give you a lot of options when it comes to movement. Now, you won't see me using the slow motion a lot in my gameplay because I am very, very new to PC. I got my first PC less than a month ago. This was one of the first games I have played on this PC on mouse and keyboard. So when it was asking me to move my little finger over to Z, I can barely do it. I am constantly at odds with moving my little pinky finger over to Z. I will get there eventually and learn it to the best of my abilities, but it does have a cool slow motion thing in this. I don't think it is utilized or is necessary as it's just something cool they implemented. There are some times where I found it very, very useful, but I find the dash way more useful. I felt like I was using the dash constantly, and I just kept forgetting to check my upper bar because there's a bar at the top of your screen that tells you exactly how much slow motion you have, and there's orbs around the map to constantly refill that bar. So I'm sure that they definitely put in enough stuff where you should be able
able to utilize it pretty constantly. I just kept forgetting I have it because, like I said, my mind went right back to Shadow Warrior 2013, so I was playing it like Shadow Warrior 2013, just dashing my happy ass all over this goddamn map. And honestly, using the dash is so effective. It is one of the best implemented dashes I have used in a game. It doesn't ever feel like it's weird or off-putting. This game doesn't have sprints, so you don't have to worry about that. It is much, again, like Shadow Warrior 2013. I'm going, like I said, gonna keep saying that throughout this video. But this game is optimized to that dash move. And I think that's why I forget there's slow motion, because this game's constantly, every platform you're doing, you're using the dash. Every time you're getting overwhelmed by enemies, you're dashing to get out of danger. It is constantly making you push your way in that direction. And on top of that, one of the coolest things ever is when you get your weapons fully upgraded. There's nothing cooler than upgrading the rocket all the way up to where it turns into like a 3 burst rocket, and then you add homing on this bitch, and you start dashing away and just homing rockets on their asses. It works pretty cool in slow motion, but when you're jumping and then dashing backwards and just fucking layering rockets into their pussy, nothing is cooler than that. I'm sorry. And I know that you can use the slow motion to really get the variety in combat that you could want if you ever find that the combat is maybe getting boring. I never found this combat boring. The enemy design is constantly evolving, and you're constantly getting new foes to stand at your front and back and in your butt to constantly keep you on your toes and on the edge of your seat. I never felt like I had fought the same enemy over like a billion times. There will get a point where you start to meet some wizards, and they'll spawn in some of your weaker enemies that you fought in the early levels, and you're like, oh, well, so now I have to fight those and the wizard ones? And it's like, no. Here's like 3 more new enemy variants that you haven't seen yet on top of this wizard who can spawn in those guys. And then later in the game, when they add in new wizards and you're like, oh, they just did another wizard? Well, they can spawn in bigger enemies, so they act very differently. They use more powerful weapons, and so every time you do get a reskin, it's not like a reskin enemy that works the exact same way. It's an enemy that has like a completely different approach to how you fight them, which I think is very cool. It's very interesting because you know that when you go up to that big wizard, he can spawn in a big bastard who throws grenades, or a big monster that has swords to just chase you down into oblivion and then Jason your ass into hell. And one big folly that retro-style games can have is their enemy design. They go too pixely, and they make the game where your enemy almost looks just like a big blob of brown pixels. And not this game, baby. Every single enemy looks intimidating and gross and evil without fully giving you the entire high-def look. It's giving your mind enough imagination to really fill in the blanks that it is working on such a perfect regard in that aspect. It's not like it's trying to make you do all the work, but it's giving you this great baseline to build off of, which it keeps your imagination running wild along with the frantic movement of this game. I think there's something really special here. It's something that I couldn't get my mind off of throughout my entire playthrough. And this isn't a short game. A lot of these indie games, you're going to jump in, be done in 5 hours, and this one I think is closer to 10. It'll probably be closer to like 15 if you play it on a harder difficulty, and once you find every single secret, you're probably looking at about 30 hours, because there's so many. Their secrets, like I said, are whole side levels, so there's probably a whole giant list of things that I still haven't even done in this game in terms of what there is to actually gain from this, because the side areas, like I said, can range from platforming puzzles to whole new levels. It's just the content in this game is there, and it has so much to give you. And the fact that I've heard so little about this game actually made me push this video out, because for the most part what I do is I make a video and then I schedule it way in the future to the point where you will get to it eventually. But after I played this video, I saw nobody was talking about it. I mean, people are talking about it, that's not fair. There are some decent channels that have covered it, but I hadn't seen some of the big heavy hitters jump in here and really talk about this game, break through it, really get in the nitty gritty, drop their sack on its forehead, and I have a small enough sack to where I don't think I would be too obtrusive on top of that head. Unlike the purple ball sack monster you're seeing on screen, I'd be like two little peanuts sitting on its forehead.
I mean, the level diversity alone is enough to talk about this game. The weapons are another reason alone to talk about this game and how great it feels. But on the levels, it's just, I was doing some extra playthroughs for this game. I was going through, getting some footage here and there. Some of my footage wasn't coming out real crispy, and I'm sure you've seen some frame rate drops. That is not the fault of the game. For some reason, when I put on OBS, it decides to flip me the finger and say, well, if you don't show me your taint, I'm not showing you anything good. Better goat see me, boy. But upon doing another little playthrough in a later section of the game, I noticed that I was actually playing through the same level as in the first portion of the game. Just the demonic goo and horror had poured into that area and it made it unattainable. It had made it completely different than when you initially went through that area. And the first time I played through it, I didn't even notice it was the same area because of the biome diversity you receive in this game and you see. And that's so cool. You see games where they reuse map designs all the time. It's something where you'll be in the same map and you'll feel like you've seen the same corridor 1,700 times. You keep pushing along and then you get lost because you're constantly seeing the same bullshit over and over again. This game, when it does utilize the same things you've seen already, it does it for atmospheric tension and to try to push the story forward. I mean, it is some of the best atmospheric storytelling I have played in one of these indie games. I mean, and that's something a lot of indie games do really well, so when I'm here gushing over it, you know it's goddamn true. This game, so if you're one of those people that are sitting out there and you see a review for one of these retro style boomer shooter bullshits and everybody's having fun with it and you play it and you feel like, well, I don't know if I really like going this far back in time. I'm kind of more nostalgic for a little more modern stuff, but I like the look of an older game. This game does that. This game is the perfect hybrid of both of those things, even more than something like Proteus, because one of the biggest downfalls of the game Proteus is after you played it for a while, you've just seen it. You've seen it. It starts to feel repetitive and boring in terms of environmental diversity. This game never has that. You got your snow areas, you got your goopy areas, you got your castles, you got your esoteric Lovecraftian areas with fucking floating bullshit. It just has everything in the game without making you feel all over the place. And that's something that should be like commended and put on a fucking pedestal. This is such a brilliantly made game in terms of level design. And I don't think I ever really got lost either in my playthroughs. There might have been one time where I got a little bit turned around or didn't know I had to put one thing in one slot. But it was very, very rare. And that doesn't mean that, oh, it's a very linear game. You just go from point A to point B. That's not true at all, because there's constant side diverts that go to these side missions, like I've already mentioned. And this game just does it in such a brilliant way that you can run right past them and then finish your thing like a normal, very linear game. But if you decide to take that extra effort to check out the path unwalked, you can get those juicy, juicy nipple drops that you are so hungry for. And that's where this game goes from just being another indie thing on sale on Steam to really slapping that clitoris to the right degree. And that is something that needs to be talked about. That is something that needs to be platformed. And I don't know why more people haven't talked about this game. And maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe Nasivi and G-Man not making a video on this is like, oh, it's just generic slop, and they think it's boring. I don't know how you could walk away from this game with that perspective. I think this game is so goddamn fun. I had so much fun with it. And the fact that, like, you get a gauntlet at a certain point in this game, this big gauntlet. You've seen me use it in the gameplay footage in the background. And then later in the game, it's not just like you change the gauntlet to like a purple gauntlet and it does a new thing. Nah, you just get a whole new ass gauntlet for your left hand. So it switches hands. This is one of the few games that when you actually use the special power of the gun or the weapon, it's a whole new weapon. I like that in the fact that it doesn't pull you out of the experience, because most of the time when you play a game with a secondary fire, it's like a machine gun with a grenade launcher. You're like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. But then there's some games where it's like, oh, your secondary fire is you turn your AR-15 into a goddamn railgun.
that doesn't make a lot of sense. Not that I hate it in games, but I like the way this game did that, and it really made it like pushed it in the right direction. And if I had to say one thing that was kind of a gripe, I felt like all the boss fights, as wonderful as they were, so poignant, the last boss fight was kind of easy, especially if you built your character in the right degree. There was some real tough boss fights in this game. But once you've learned a lot of the boss fights up until this point, you get to this last guy and you just kind of fucking knock through him. I mean, I died here because I was testing some stuff out to get footage for this, and he can really kill you really, really fast. It's not like he's weak, but his attacks are very simple to dodge, and you can just basically tag up these upgrades that you've been building upon on whatever build you're doing, and really just storm bullets into his asshole and push through this final boss fight. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, King Jiffy, I've watched your streams. I know you play this shit on easy. You shouldn't really be complaining about difficulty. And I get that. I understand where you're coming from. I am as casual comes. But when I've had to redo boss fights over and over and over again throughout this gameplay, even on easy, because they're so well made and they make you really learn the boss, to then get to this final boss and be able to just goof around and test things on him because I know that he's easy to beat because I beat him on my first try. That kind of was underwhelming to me when he was supposed to be this end-all be-all. He is the guy that has caused all this hell. You are defeating him to end it all and to finally have your revenge and have your moment of clarity and peace from the hell that you had to deal with since your childhood. He just felt so easy because like you see in this one where I'm fighting him now, this is going to be the time I beat him. It just felt like kind of underwhelming. It wasn't bad. It was good. It was still decent. It just didn't live up to the levels that some of these other wonderful boss fights have in this game, where it was over the top and massive, and some of them even have like a second phase, or like a faux second phase, where after you've done a little bit of damage, they're like, haha, that damage doesn't matter. There's a lot of experimentation going on with a lot of the boss fights through this, and this last one was just kind of, well, if you've got the guided rockets, you could beat him. It's not a big deal. You have this easy attack to do. So, I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm not going to discount the game for the boss fight being a little easy. I'm not going to shit on it. I just felt like if there was a couple gripes I had, it was the voice acting in the final boss fight, but everything else was just absolutely amazing. This game is a solid 8 out of 10, and you should play it. It's constantly on sale, and it's funny that you can get a game like this that is a full-fledged experience that is fun from beginning to end, and you're not even having to pay $70 fucking full price, when game companies are out there like Sony and Microsoft trying to feed you the same schlop where they care more about graphics than gameplay. And I'm loving that there's games out there that are pushing gameplay to the forefront, and that's all I have for you. Like and subscribe, you goddamn pussies.